Hey everybody, welcome back to Art During the Quarantine. I'm Meg, and we survived day 11 days of quarantine. I was looking at my calendar and I was realizing next Monday is 2 weeks. I just can't even wrap my mind around it. So surreal. I hope you are doing well today. Before we jump in, let me pray for us and commit this time to the Lord, and we'll get going. Lord God, thank you. Thank you for the sound of the birds chirping outside and Lord, wind that moves the air around and reminds us of your presence. I pray over this time, God, that the things that we do and the words that come out of my mouth would be a blessing to you. I pray that you would teach us how to love you better through our time here, and even more than that, Lord, help us to use this time set apart to bring you glory and to bring you praise. It's in God's name that we pray. Amen. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for joining me. You guys, you are the chosen few. I mean, quite truly, you are the dedicated ones. So here we are. Let's do a quick roundup of all the supplies that we need, and we'll get going here. So you're gonna need one piece of blank paper. Looks like this. Mine's about A4 size, but if you're in the US letters, just great. You are going to need a black pen. You're going to need some black paint. I use acrylic. That works well for me. I have gouache here, which is a bougie artist version. It basically dries a lot faster than the pigment denser, but it's a fancy version of acrylic. So get one of those. Acrylic paint is great. If you do not have that at home, if you have a really good Sharpie marker that you're going to commit to coloring in all of these spaces with, you'll be all set. You're going to need a paintbrush. I'm going to pick some crayons as my other sort of weapon of choice today, but you could pick colored pencils or markers, and that's great. I think besides that, I think that's all we got. Okay, sweet. Well, let's get started. So a couple days ago when I was doing, I think it was day 9, I mentioned that I would love to show you a little bit of some of the art that I've been working on. So today is kind of an invitation into the most recent project I've been working on as an artist, which might seem weird. I'm not really sure. We'll see how it goes. I've been in a series for about a year of line drawings, so studying how lines work and how forms interact on two-dimensional surfaces, which, if you know me, normally I do sculpture work, so this is a real big jump. But I'm excited to show you a little bit of how I do that. Normally, my pieces of paper are huge, so I like to work with a large amount of space. But today, I like the challenge of having to fit all my ideas right here. So let's do it together. I'm gonna have you grab out that black tube of paint and grab a paintbrush, and I'm going to show you, we're going to create sort of 3 almost like amoeba-like forms on the surface of your paper. So it's going to look like this. I'll move this a little bit closer to you. Great. And I'm gonna just pull my paint right out of the tube and right onto the page, but if you have like a paint tray or something, you can use that. And we're gonna start with one form on just one corner of the paper. I'm gonna take this paint and I'm gonna slowly start to move it around like this. I love how acrylic paints, depending on what type you get, can be nice and dense. There's no guessing where this paint is going. So here I'm just kind of making not a perfect circle or oval by any means, but I'm kind of just creating a form that's pretty organic and natural, kind of like that. Trying to keep my lines nice and clean on this border, and then making sure it's really filled in well. So it should look like this. Okay, so we've got one spot done. I'm going to create an opposing form on this other corner of the paper, about 3 times this size. You can do that with me. Sometimes the paper slips away from me when I do this. There we go. Great. Did you make any fun foods today and all of your time inside? Anything fun out of the ordinary? I'm cooking up a batch of, what is it, French onion soup right now, because I have 1.5 million onions, and I thought, what can I do with all of these? And that's what I can do. Perfect. So here we are, again, trying to keep these borders really nice and clean. Okay, looking good. I don't like this form quite yet, but it's getting there. It's growing on me. So if you want to see just kind of at face value, this is sort of the spaces that we're working with so far. I'm going to clean up this top line here, and then we'll get our last main shape drawn, or painted if you will. So I love these forms because they're natural, so they're not anything like too geometric and structured, but with the clean lines around them, the viewer really has no guesswork as to kind of like necessarily where their boundaries are, and that's kind of why I like them. I used this type of painting and drawing for, especially when I was in a season of support raising to move to Spain to serve here. I used this type of painting and drawing to kind of process some of my relationships and to think about, you know, maybe how some things would be the same or different in my time away from the States, and I can explain to you that process in a little bit. Okay, so here we are. My paint is drying real quick. I wonder how yours is doing. We've got these 2 spots on our paper. I'm going to create one other spot probably down here. It's going to be about 1/3 the size of this first one that we painted. Okay. And again, nothing too like geometric, but has a little bit of wobble. Okay. Well, that looks good to me. I have a little extra paint on my brush, so I'm going to clean up a couple of these lines. You can do the same in this time. It's nice to do it when all the paint is setting, so you don't have the illusion of a ton of layers later. We'll do layers, but in a different way. Cool. Okay, so awesome. I'm gonna get some of that paint off my brush so nothing settles. Great. How's your paper looking? How's your partner's paper looking? So far, so good? Okay, great. So, quick timeout. So here we are. This is what my paper looks like so far. You're probably thinking, we forgot this corner, and that's okay. We don't need to. As I kind of rotate it, I almost like it a little bit more like this, so I might change the orientation of my paper and do it this way. Great. So from here, we are going to kind of begin the exercise I do when I begin my work, and I'm kind of going to explain that process to you. So I'm going to run this before. This is going to be interesting. So one of my favorite ways to look at the world is to observe behavior. And part of me thinks it stems back from when I was in theater a long time ago. I was always taught to people watch and look at how people do different things and take some of those habits and apply them to different characters later. But I found that I actually do the same thing with artwork, and you can do the same thing with visual artwork. So what I love to do in my line studies is look at the way shapes behave and how they connect to each other, and consider sort of personifying them in a way, giving them some verbs, giving them some adjectives to kind of embody what they do on a paper's surface. So in the back of your mind, look at your paper right now, pick one of the 3 spots that you have painted or doodled or drawn or wherever you're at in this process. Pick one of those spots and come up with a couple verbs that might describe that shape. So I kind of like this guy down here. He's like a potato, and potatoes are one of my favorite foods. So I'm probably gonna pick him. For me, I'll go first and then you can go. How about that? That's good, friends. We take turns. For me, he seems pretty comfortable. He's kind of got this slouchy posture, and I like that about it. I think in some ways, he's got sort of like, if I were to think about him as like one of my friends, I think he'd be that person who is quiet, but every once in a while, hi mom, every once in a while, comes up with some comment that's just like hilarious. I don't know if it's just like this curve, it's giving me that sort of like sleeky, like spy-like thing. I don't know, but that's sort of how I envision him like behaving in a conversation. And then next, I think like the last sort of adjective or verb I would give, oh man, I mean, I already kind of said smooth. Let's see. I think he's kind of easygoing. I think that's probably the last one I would do. So pick another one of your spots, come up with a couple ways to describe that form, and then we'll use those words and those verbs to kind of dictate the ways that we're gonna begin a line study around these forms. So I'm gonna put this paper down so you can see where I go from here. I might blow on this actually just for a minute because my paint is really thick. Turn to your neighbor, tell them one of your verbs, or if you need to, shout it to no one in the room if you're alone, and we'll keep moving here. So we've got, oh, hi Kim, sorry. So we'll keep moving. I'd like you to grab out your black pen. We'll start there. You're probably thinking, man, does the girl ever use any color that isn't black? Yes, I do, and we will in just a minute. So I'm gonna start with this first form that I decided, and I'm gonna choose to surround this entire form with a design or a pattern that I think echoes sort of some of the behaviors that I just had. So I think I'm gonna use the word slouchy, and to do that, I'm gonna create, let me grab a scrap piece of paper here. I'm gonna use a design to kind of dictate that sort of slouchiness. The first thing that comes to mind for me are some of these dashes like this. And I'm going to use these to create an entire perimeter of that form. So go back to your paper. You can brainstorm any other type of line or spot or pattern and use that as a ring around your form, whatever makes sense. So let's say, for example, someone that has a very opposing form. Let's see. Mine slouchy, yours would be sort of upright and strict maybe. You could do something a little bit more jagged, or maybe your line is a bookworm and they just love to spend time by themselves. I'm not generally that person, but I can relate because sometimes I have those moments. So maybe you would do more gentle curves and lines. You can brainstorm, take a couple seconds, and I'll show you kind of how I'm gonna do this first one. So I'm going to take that line, I'm going to begin at the very base, and I'm just going to slowly do these jagged lines around this form, like this. I'm going to keep rotating my paper so that the orientation is not perpendicular, but pretty close to perpendicular with the border at all times. My paper is still a little wet, so I'm trying not to get black paint on me. Now, if I lost it in the whole idea of my shapes are personified, I would just think about a couple, whenever you go to an art museum maybe, a couple of the things that strike you first about a painting or a work of art, and apply some of those same principles to your work and see if there are any parallels. I recently took my students on a field trip to the Reina Sofia Museum here, and it was wild because everybody interacts with art differently, but let me tell you, there's nothing quite like bringing a group of high school and middle schoolers to the modern section of a museum. Oh my gosh, we need like, what are those goggles called? No, not masks. Oh, what's it called? I can't remember. I needed blindfolds. There it is. I needed like blindfolds, and then also I wanted them to see so many cool pieces of art all at the same time. It was incredibly conflicting. Okay, so I'm continuing to circle this form with those kind of slanted, slouchy lines. Now, here we are, working our way around. Cool. Okay, so this is what I've got so far. How's yours looking? Cool. All right, now it's time for contrast. If you've seen any of my videos, I say this word all of the time because contrast is what makes art exciting. It brings our eyes to a focal point and helps us to really focus as the viewer. So as the artist, we give you a hand by giving you something to focus on by providing contrast. So these lines are dashed and kind of create almost a scatteredness around the form now that I'm looking at it, which is ironically very different than what this form started off with. Interesting. So what I'd like you to do is grab a different color to work with. I think I might do something, maybe I'd go with orange today. It's kind of been in like this, this orange kind of curry mood for the last couple months. I'm gonna grab an orange crayon if you have a different colored pencil or something, You can pick any color that seems to match the language of your forms here. And we are going to create just a single ring around this form. I'm gonna probably trace it twice, but I wanna sort of contain this chaos with a straight line. And that's one of the great ways to sort of hone everything in. And because I have a bright color, it's really gonna contrast well with the paper at hand, but not in a way that necessarily competes with the forms that I've already drawn. So I'm gonna work my way around here. This orange, I'm gonna allow my line to have a little bit of wiggle. Not ever gonna touch that black line if I can help it. Okay, I'm gonna keep rotating this paper as I do that. Cool. Oh yeah, this guy, he's a good one. They kind of sort of become your friends. Okay, so I've got the first ring. I'm gonna go over that again, depending on how dark the pigment is of your of this utensil. If you're using a marker or a pencil or a crayon or whatever, you might want to make it a little bit more intense so that this idea is really concrete, especially from a distance. I'm just gonna go over this line one more time. Oh my gosh, I almost broke this crayon again. If you saw my video a couple days ago, I broke like 4 crayons all in a row. Oh my goodness, I promise I'm not that strong. Okay. Great. So again, just sort of solidifying this idea, applying a little bit more pressure, but really I think that second line really helps that pop. So that's what we've got on the very bottom of our page. Now, if you notice, I'm getting really close to a border here. Ooh, borders, this is one of my favorites. We get to decide how this form, what it does when it comes up with a boundary. What does it do? Does it embrace the boundary and just kind of like lean into it? Or does it hold its ground and just say, oh, you only get to see this part of the picture and everything else just runs off the page? So I think this form would be a call it a day, let the form run off the page. So that's what we're gonna do. So this next line that we do to surround this form is going to be one that probably goes off the page over here. And if yours is close enough, or you can kind of gauge depending on what your drawing looks like, you can consider that interaction as we do this next ring. So we started with this kind of slouchy line inside, we've contained it with drama, and now we're gonna do something that's a little bit more of an invitation for the other forms to interact. So what kind of line could be invitational? Great question. Here we are. Let's go back to our sort of sketch page for what kind of lines that we could draw. One of the things that I like to do, again, are these small dashes, but almost like a pencil drawing like this, and kind of similar to like what a heartbeat would look like. That can be invitational because these arms of the line are kind of reaching out towards the rest of the page. So we could do something like this. You could do something jagged, such as that. I'm going for a little bit more of a hand-drawn quality, so I might go with this first one. If you want to see closer, I'll just bring this close up here. Just a simple, almost like a glorified scribble, if you will. So we'll try that. All right, here we go. I think in regards to pencils or types of tools that I'm going to use for this one, I'm going to snag out my colored pencils real quick. And I might choose a color that contrasts just enough that it doesn't necessarily fight this orange, but maybe is a friend. Let's see, what could be a friendly color to that? Let's try, what about this soft gray that I have? I've got this sort of silver gray that we're working with. Let's try that. It's gonna be a lot more gentle than this orange, but I think it's gonna keep our color palette kind of consistent if we use some similar tones across the paper. Great, so heartbeat away. I'm gonna start this scribble all the way around. Again, trying to keep these lines perpendicular to the lines I have already drawn. And here we are. This is the moment where we get to really decide who this shape is. This shape is going to say, deal with it. I'm going off the page. All right, cool. So I got it on this side of my paper, looking really good. I'm actually going to rotate so that I can see everything, and then I'll show you in just a minute. Now they kind of almost become like amoeba-like forms, which I really love because I get a lot of inspiration from nature and things that grow. Not the bad amoebas, the good ones. All right, great. So here we are, almost at the finish line. Great, here we go. Looking glorious. Oh, beautiful. Look at how inviting that last line is. It's almost like the paper suddenly is willing to receive this form we plopped in the middle of the paper. Cool. All right, now it's time to give these other two dots down here a little bit of attention. So put your paper down, pick which one intrigues you the most. This small guy down here, I just kind of want to give him some attention. So I'm gonna start there. Now, I've already established sort of a color palette for my piece. I've got orange, I've got a silver, and I've got a black. So what I'm gonna do is change up some of the order with this form to kind of create a different language over here, but also a consistent color palette so they definitely don't fight on the page. So instead, I'm gonna start with orange on the very close inner ring, and I'm also going to keep the same lines that I chose. So the orange line is just a simple straight line that we did over here, so I'm gonna continue that over here. Okay, again, trace over that. Oh, see, I'm breaking crayons everywhere. Oh my gosh, it's hilarious. Okay. So, trace over that line one more time. And there we go. All right. I might only add one more layer around this, sorry, mirror effect, around this image or this circle here, because it's smaller. It's maybe not as grown up as the other forms. So I think what I am gonna do is surround it with this silver heartbeat so that these heartbeats can connect over here. Okay, you know the drill. Again, remember this relationship to this border is important. So if you did something similar here, I'd continue that same metaphor on this side. Keep rotating my paper, you keep rotating yours. Okay, now here's also an interaction to consider. What do these two forms do when they touch on your paper? Are they friends? Are they enemies? Do they want to connect and become one? I mean, think about it. We can consider some of these things. I think they're just going to touch, but they're not necessarily going to connect on my paper. Lovely. All right, 2 for 2, looking fabulous. All right, I'm gonna move on to this last circle on my page. And again, we're gonna keep with the same color palette, but I am gonna continue to change the order. So I think what I'm gonna do is, let's start with the heartbeat on the inside. Let's see how that changes the conversation on the side of the paper. Here we are, heartbeat away. Sorry, I'm taking my paper away from you. Okay, how's yours going? Great. Okay, again, here we are. We've got a very interesting divide in our paper. It's almost like this one is the most grown up. This one's next oldest, and this is the baby one. I kind of love that. That's awesome. So we get to decide from here how we want to engage the rest of the space. Now, this is where I feel like we can either add a couple more layers to this one, or we can add some other lines to sort of bring us through the story of how these pieces connect. So I think off first glance, I'm gonna add another border of this black pattern of the dashes around this heartbeat, just to sort of add a more contrasting color around the border. So when I do add some other lines, they have, there's kind of a security of who these two forms are before other lines get involved. So grab your pen out. If you would like to, you're welcome to add this kind of dashed line effect on the outside. I'm gonna keep rotating my paper. Awesome. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you can keep it sort of consistent, you'll be happy later. Okay, so again, here we are. We've got sort of this halo effect that happened on the outside of this one, which I really like. And then we've got these other two forms with that bright orange. Now, here is what, when I think it's gonna get interesting in our drawing, although I think it's interesting already. I'm gonna grab that orange out, and I'm gonna kind of tell a story with the orange. Why does this form not have orange? Well, because we decided not to, but how can I make that make sense to my viewer? So what I'm gonna do is take this pen, or this color, and I'm gonna draw a line going from this far corner up through the middle. And one of the great things I think about what this line is gonna be is it's gonna kind of be a break, my pencil or my crayon, a break between these two obviously different parts of our paper, but also it's gonna kind of provide a narrative quite literally of a line connecting these two worlds. So I'm gonna start over here. I'm gonna slowly kind of snake this line through like this. And just like I did before, go back and sort of give this line a little bit more character. I'm gonna thicken this line a little bit. Again, adding a little bit of attitude is good. What is this line doing here? Does it know who it is, or is it a little bit shy? I like my lines to always kind of be purposeful. Great, so I've connected that line. Cool. Now what we're gonna do, I think I'm gonna take this line and I'm gonna create another one that's gonna snake down, hugging the corner of these two forms and then connecting it up here near this exit. We're almost creating a system in which these forms kind of exist, the first forms that we drew. Again, we're gonna just thicken that line up. Okay, sweet. So we've got these three forms that are pretty well outlined and understood. We've got two lines sort of interrupting the program, but also they kind of make a lot of sense. Now, what I do sort of feel like needs a little bit of attention, I feel like there needs to be one more line, and I'm gonna start over here. I'm gonna arc it down and sort of do an S curve like that. We're so close. We're doing great. Okay. Again, I'm gonna start up here. Like this. Awesome. Again, give that line some attitude. Great. So in what we just did, if you were following along and trusting me blindly, we connected these three stories. I can't do this in mirror. 1, 2, and 3. Connected these three stories with lines. And you made a choice, even though you didn't even realize it in the moment, you made a choice that these lines were gonna respond to where the previously drawn forms were on the page. And so in some ways, these lines know what's around them. So you made a decision on their behalf of where they belong. So pat on the back, you're already rocking out. But what's awesome about this is this gives us also a sort of grid and system for which to draw some other things. So I think how I'm gonna finish this drawing is just use my black pen and give one side of each of these lines a black, just simple line next to it. And then the other side, I'm going to add a little bit of gray. And that'll frame them enough to make them feel a little bit more concrete and solidified. And then I think we're looking really good. Grab your black pen. I'm just gonna pick one side of the line to kind of continue. Let this line kind of jump. Here's a decision we have to make. Do the black lines overlap? What line is on top of the other one? So I'm gonna decide this one, since it was drawn first, is the tallest one. So this line needs to cater to that and go beneath. Here we are. Great. And again, because this line goes on top, I'm just gonna pick to always go on the right side of the line facing me, but I mean, of course, probably for you, it's on the left. Got a little crayon in my, my pen. Awesome. Okay, again, this line is above this one over here, so I can go right over. Great, and lastly, I just have this line over here. Now remember this line, he's beneath this top one, so we are gonna jump underneath and cross. Still got a little crayon, darken the last part of this line here. Okay, looking good for that side. If you want a picture to zoom out, this is where we're at. Now grab that icy gray you've got going on, and we're just gonna bring this line around here, kind of doing a similar thing. Remember what line was there first, so we don't have any lines that are fighting each other. Okay. Again, I'm just kind of curving this line alongside this orange one. I'm bringing it all the way to the base of the drawing. Last one here. Okay. Oh, and one more line I need to clean up. Okay. Fabulous. You guys, you did it. So from here, and again, I wanted the orientation of mine to be like this. What you have successfully done just now is your first abstract art piece. Way to go. But you also know a lot more behind it. We know that these forms, they have backgrounds, and we have descriptions of kind of who they are. And then these lines, quite literally, help us connect them across the page. The last thing you need to do is grab out that black pen, give it a signature. I'm going to do mine in the very bottom corner here. If you wanted to add another couple borders to some of these lines and you're feeling the gusto to do it, you go for it. But if not, I'm feeling like it's a really great place to stop here. So there we have it. Give it a signature. I always like to add a date if there's room, because I never remember dates. There we have it. All right, before we go, I'd like to read you a passage today, just as an encouragement to you. Again, if you need another example, there this is. All right, so Psalms 46, God is our fortress. God is our refuge and strength, very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There we go. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, she will not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice and the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. That's an encouragement to me because it reminds me that God's in control of every single thing that I could possibly experience. And I know that this illness that is just spreading so quickly is not something that he's unaware of. And so would you pray with me as we close this time? We had a blast getting to add life and sort of understanding some forms that maybe we didn't know before, but maybe rest in knowing that God always knows. He knows what the mountains are doing and how the oceans are playing, and he knows our hearts and he knows our desires and our needs before we could ever ask. So pray with me. God, thank you for the gift of getting to make artwork, to understand different forms and lines, and it's just another way to know you better because you're the first one who ever worked with forms, God. We get to read about it in your word and we're amazed. I pray over everyone who is watching this, God, that you would go before them into this day ahead of them. I pray that they would be walking in your blessing and your provision. I pray for understanding with those around them, and I also just pray that you would be the God of comfort, buoying their heart in the midst of all that is challenging right now. God, we thank you because you have taken care of this planet, and you are taking care of this planet. Even as illnesses come, God, you're our healer, and we trust you. It is in Jesus' name that we ask you to continue healing and blessing people who are serving so diligently in all of these hospitals around the world. Pray that you protect them in your name, and that you would protect us as well, Lord. Help us to do our part to keep this from spreading. It is in Jesus' sweet name that I pray. Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a gift to do art with you. If you have any questions, you can add some things in the comments. If you finished your drawing and you want to share, throw the picture in the comments and I can celebrate all the fun things that you drew and painted. Thank you so much. You survived day 11 of quarantine. If you're in Spain, have a great afternoon. If you're in the US, have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.